Well, I just noticed there's 2 copies of the terrain and effects chart, one of them on the back of the rule book. I was always looking at the rule book, so I didn't know. So this is the second part, the specific instructions to cover both the Schlieffen Plan and the Western Front for the duration of the war. If you haven't watched the original introduction to the standard rules for Der Weltkrieg, you may want to look through that. I'd like to, like I said in that, kind of zoom in and show some examples of play. And I'm going to try to do that as I do the playthrough and as I get comfortable with the system. This is my first look at it as well as yours. And we're probably both approaching it the same way. I'm looking at it to say, hey, is this a series that, you know, I want to invest in big? Do I think I want either to play out more of these smaller operational games, or am I so addicted to this idea that I want to do the whole war in, gosh, I don't even know how many maps we're talking. It's a lot. Somewhere there's a picture of the whole map setup. Maybe not. I know there is on the SPW website, which you can get to from a link from Board Game Geek's Der Weltkrieg page, or also from, I'm sure there's a link on Consim World as well. I don't know it though. Okay, I didn't follow it. So, the specifics here first start with the Schlieffen Plan itself, where we're going to run from the first turn in August through, I think it's the 5th turn in November. So we've got most of what's set up. These are the August reinforcements, and then out to here is my November reinforcements. I've got the December stuff set up already because, well, it's easier to set things up like that. Now, got a couple of places here. I just want to point these out. These are Austrian units. They're treated like German for the most part in the game. Although I think there are maybe some little Phillips about them. The Schlieffen Plan doesn't use as many counters, obviously. There's a lot of stuff over here in these 3 trays. It's mainly reinforcements for the duration game. Let's see. This is so the base rule book was only 20 pages. The scenario rule book is 40 more pages, but it's almost all reinforcements, although there are some special rules set up here for each of the specific scenarios. And I'm not going to go into them all in detail. We're going to kind of hit them as we play. Just be assured that there's a lot of the special situations that are taken into account are taken into account in the scenarios as well. I'm trying to look through here. So one of the special rules in this scenario is dealing with French and Belgian relations. The French are allowed to send the Belgians supply points. They're allowed to supply Belgian units, but it can't go vice versa from what I can tell. The English, on their other hand, seem to be operating as a completely independent force, and there is no loaning there that I see. We've got the capacities for the rail lines, which is 15 for the Germans, 15 for the French, and 5 for the Belgian network. The first 5 turns we're not going to have rail movement. No rail capacities allowed. There is an exception to that, though. Some of the, I think the artillery are allowed to do it, and they don't count against the capacity during those turns. You can move all your artillery, and that's no big deal. And then on the 6th and 7th turn of August 1914, you'll have half the rail capacity. This is going to use some automated plans that are in place that couldn't really be changed. The player wouldn't have significant ability as the front commander to, say, change the high commands plans. And this is similar to what you saw in La Grande Guerre, if you watched that, where you have to pick these plans at the beginning of the game. Well, here they're picked for you. It would be nice if there were some alternative plans available, like there are in La Grande Guerre. But for this, it gives you the nice historical Schlieffen plan in place here. Now, this only applies for the Schlieffen plan scenario, although some of the other scenarios may have plans as well. I haven't looked at them yet. And those are handled through certain movement and attack restrictions. So, for example, the Belgians on turn 3, when they're mobilized, have to kind of pull back, and I think it's to Brussels area. I'm not sure. To defend that instead of this far forward defense that they have here. Oh no, Liege. Wait, hold on. 1911, 26. Hold on. Let's see what these are. 1807 is, yeah, actually it's going to be here at Namur, where the defense is centered for, what is that, the dial line or whatever? I don't remember. French infantry under the first 4 headquarters, this is 4, 3, 2, and 1, are going to have to make a northeastern attack. And they basically have to surge forward and try to reach a zone of control. It's the units that are originally aligned with them, so I have to be careful because in the setup instructions it tells you what's part of the 5th Army. That stuff will not be required to do this. But these first 4 armies are going to have to push forward, try to hit the German line as fast as possible, and actually then when they do, they have to attack it. And I think that's only the 3rd and 4th turn that they have to do that. Yeah. The German and Austria-Hungarian units can use rail movement on the 3rd and 4th turn at no cost of rail capacity. British units can only use half their movement on the 4th turn, and I think that's the first term of mobilization. When the Alliance, or Entente, has some restrictions on their ability to react here. On the 6th turn, the German reinforcement arrival phase requires them to withdraw some units, and that's handled in the reinforcements rules. And in fact, there are withdrawals throughout the game for both sides to pull units out. Okay, so now, yeah, I'm going to ignore the victory conditions for the Schlieffen plan itself. They're based on the normal victory conditions, which is going to be actually, are they? Wait, see the schedule for DM. Yeah, they're somewhat based, I guess, on the demoralization points, but I don't see that. Oh, yes, they are. Okay. So, you get a modifier to the victory conditions based on how close you get to Paris. So, if you conquer Paris with the Germans, you get +4 levels. Whereas, if the Germans never get within 10 of Paris, it's -3 levels, and it fluctuates between those. Now, the base levels, though, are going to be based on the casualties. So a German decisive victory is to cause 250 more demoralization points, more than Germany suffers. And then the Entente decisive is France and Britain combined suffer 25 or less more than Germany. So Germany, of course, is going to be, as they historically did, causing more damage and capturing territories. And we'll see how the demoralization points are assigned as we go. We have the setup for the scenario, and every scenario has got its own setup, and then it has this optional setup. I've set up the historical because withdrawals and stuff and such are assigned to specific units. And if you play by the optional, those specific units don't come out. You can just bring something out of the same strength. I haven't decided yet whether I want to go into that detail. I don't know if it's more realistic to withdraw units that were specifically withdrawn, or if I should have that flexibility. And I'm still debating that in my own head. And I feel like the designer kind of said, well, it's a real pain in the ass to set all this up, and it's a lot easier to do it just by strength points. But replacements, etc., when you upgrade units, say to the assault units, you're going to have, you know, you can either do specific replacements or you can choose them. I just don't know which way I want to do it. I'm kind of tossing that around in my head because I almost think it's more realistic, more historical to allow the player to choose, because probably unit positioning is part of the decision-making process as to which units get upgraded, etc. I don't know which way I want to go there. Then we have this mobilization completion, and on different turns, different units become mobilized. You can't use units till they're mobilized, and once they're fully mobilized, you can move them. If they're attacked, however, they complete their mobilization after that. So it'll affect a headquarters' ability to move. However, the headquarters can spend supply at any time, even if they're not mobilized yet. The reinforcements are covered in the back. There's one consolidated reinforcement chart, no biggie there. Core, I've already talked about these. We have two different ways. We have this flexible core markers, which go over on these player aids, and then this little marker, which indicates the core to be placed, will be there. But alternatively, we have these other core markers, which are really just strength point agglomerations. And I don't think there's any restrictions there, except they have to be the same type of unit and the same strength in order to agglomerate into one of them. Artillery also have these. I'm not going to show you one of them. They are pretty simple. Okay, the Hindenburg line. So starting in 1916, the Germans, yeah, this isn't really Schlieffenplan anymore. We're getting into sort of more general rules, but here's the problem. Then we get to this rules for mid and late war Western scenario. I assume the scenarios are going to tell me when I start using those, because they change a few things. But anyway, the Hindenburg line is going to allow the Germans to use engineers to build special Hindenburg forts. And they look, or trenches. They look rather like the normal trenches. Except they're a little darker and a little easier to spot. And they've got the devastated marker on the back. They take a significant amount of time to construct, I believe. You already have to have a trench there, and you must have an active double track rail line in your network. You have to have an engineer there, and it has to be the first non-winter turn of the year. At this point, you place the Hindenburg marker underneath the trench, and at the start of the first winter turn, the trench is going to be removed, the regular trench, and now you have a Hindenburg line marker. The engineer has to stay there for the entire time. He can't go off and fix railways, which is the only other thing I think he can do. You're limited by countermix. And they're a -3 die roll modifier instead of a -2 die roll modifier. They also will never be removed due to not being in an enemy zone of control, and they're not removed if they're unoccupied. They're only removed if the enemy actually captures them, in which case they're replaced with a devastation marker. Okay. Gas. Now this game handles gas correctly, I think. Legrand Guerre also handled it well. They use different mechanisms for this. Basically, you're going to get gas counters through the reinforcement table. In some scenarios, Well, the scenarios will start with them, but for the grand campaign, the complete war, you end up getting them just from the reinforcement table. And you're allowed to use them when you like. If you keep them, though, from month to month, you have to roll dice for them. And on a 2, 3, or 12, the German will lose gas markers they're keeping. On a 2, 3, 4, 11, or 12, the Entente will lose them. Okay, so that gas countermeasures could be discovered in the time. And then when you actually use them, you roll on this little track to see how effective they are. Historically, gas was not terribly effective except in a couple of cases where it was massively effective. So this is like the first uses from the La Grande Guerre thing. It's considered to be a major gas attack of a new type that could really swing things. Any other gas that doesn't roll on here, and there's more markers, so there must be more gas that shows up in this game than just the 3 potential first attacks that happen in that game. It could either be a new introduction or just a particularly powerful and effective use. What they're going to do, well, at the worst, they could cancel the attack, or they could create penalty die roll modifiers to the attack. On the best side, if there's any loss, the defender has to retreat. They could increase the attack modifier. Well, these are additive. As well, increasing the chances of a withdrawal, reducing effective artillery by the enemy, etc., by the defender. Tanks are mainly an Entente weapon. The Germans do have, I think, one, maybe a couple, I don't really remember. They have at least one marker, though, because there were some Central Powers tanks, not many. And the way tanks are going to work, you can move them around by rail as much as you like, but if you decide to move them hex to hex by normal movement methods, you have to roll a die to see if they lose strength points in doing so. And this applies to retreats and advances as well as attacking, or as well as just normal movement. And you take casualties by moving them. Give specifics of how to move them, how to combine them, all pretty much following the normal. Now, what do? They help you force the defender to retreat. So, if the total of losses on the combat table plus the number of attacking strength points exceeds the number of defending infantry, the defender is forced to retreat unless they're in an urban or mountain terrain and that's being defended. Remember, you defend based on the hex side you're attacked in. You can choose an adjacent type of terrain, though. I'm hoping I covered that because that's one of the tricky things here. So a unit here attacked from, say, this hex could pick rough, but one attack from this hex would get the river defense and could pick that, broken terrain, not rough. Rough is the brown. Broken terrain. Looks rough. Alright. And tank units take additional losses from the counterattack table. This is going to be calculated. Let's see. The number of tank battalions divided by the number of attacking divisions multiplied by the counterattack loss. And they give an example. 9 divisions with a tank brigade attack. The counterattack calls for a loss of 8 strength points. The attacker will have to lose 8 strength points plus tank strength points. 3 divided by the 9 divisions. 3, let's see. Where's the 3 come from? The number of attacking tank battalions, 3, divided by the 9, times 8, and that comes out as 2 additional strength points of tanks. Tank points used in counterattack count as only a half strength point for determining if retreat is required. Defending tanks are only lost if all defending infantry are gone. If there's a tank versus tank combat, there's 2 separate counterattacks. First, the non-tank defending units fire, done as previously, and then a counterattack by the defending tanks only, which is taken out only on the attacking tank strength points. Tanks require supplies, as normal. British tanks have a maximum strength of 8 until the 1st of October. Okay. Special rules for the U.S. entering. This is mainly to cover the U.S. unwillingness to cooperate with the other allies. So only some of their units can receive supply from other allies. Basically some fraction of their force. What is that? 8 infantry divisions can have supply expended by British or French in a turn. 16 can have counterattack supply expended. United States can get supply points from the British or French, but they can't transfer them to someone else. And the 93rd Provisional Division is African Americans. It is placed under French command. It doesn't count against their normal limits there. English or U.S. units, I believe, many of the units are double size, so they count as twice as large. An infantry division, for example, counts as 2 divisions. All right. When we hit some of these, I haven't looked at this as well as I have the rest of the rules, but I started scanning through this, and it didn't really make a lot of difference. It didn't look too different to me. We get these entente front line sectors where the lines start to coalesce into particular sectors that only one country was in charge of. And that becomes restricted by the rules. Some units have a railroad movement factor. They can only move by rail. Special rules on how to place the German assault units. And then each scenario is going to have its own restrictions. And supposedly, from what I understand from the campaign, each of these is supposed to take effect at a given, when that scenario is in play, essentially. I'm not sure. You may have to use a little bit, I haven't looked at these, but you may have to use a little bit of common sense in fitting these into place correctly. Now, a little later, we get to the Western Front duration game. I'm going to combine this as I did with the other one. Okay, so for the Western Front duration, you just play through all these different scenarios. Whatever rules are in the scenario are still in force, with some specific exceptions. They look fairly minor in this little section, but we'll see. Headquarters engineers, artillery, and mountain units. Well, okay. Headquarters and engineers, like I said, they come back in 3 months, right? Artillery are replaced using infantry replacement strength points, but they're, what, 2 for 1 or something? Yeah, you have to spend double the infantry on getting a replacement point for an artillery piece. You can use regular replacements to bring mountain units back up. Marine units, well, for the French and German, I think they're the only ones that have it. Marine units as well. And the British can use them for Irish and Indians. this is one of the more interesting things here. This, we gave you an army, we expect you to use it. Now, this is, yeah, here it is. Germany may not have more than 200 supply points total in its headquarters on the Western Front prior to 1917. Well, I got 200 right there, and the rest are up here. So I have to assume that this is only post-Schlieffen. After the Schlieffen Plan scenario is done, these come into effect. And likewise, we have ones Great Britain may not have more than 120. These go up over the war. And if you exceed these, you lose. It's that simple. Now, clearly, I think any players who accidentally did so, some kind of agreement could be come to. But, you know, it's intended to force the players to actually push their attacks forward and make sure that that you actually spend these. Now, what's kind of tricky here is this is at any time. So you could bump up there through, you know, just not paying enough attention. And that's kind of a problem. I think I could see losing the game accidentally due to these points very easily. But the goal of it all is to force the players to actually attack. In a lot of strategic World War I games, you'll find Germany stops attacking on the West Front. You'll also find in this game that attacking is probably very, very painful after those entrenchments are in place. And it's going to cost you demoralization points. So it's in your best interest within the rest of the confines of the game not to attack. Well, in order to make it a requirement, they have this limit. I'm not sure how thrilled I am about this solution, but I don't know what else to do outside of adding a lot of rules like La Grande Guerre does about, you know, defining an offensive and forcing the player to take one, etc. This may achieve the same effect, forcing the players to actually use those supply points and chew up their troops. Okay, demoralization points are how you win. Now you can remember these affected the Schlieffen Plan as well, but they're covered here in a general way in the Grand Campaign or whatever. Here it specifies they're accumulated by Germany, France, Great Britain, and the United States, but they don't affect the United States for whatever reason. There also seems to be a missing track. There's no place that I can find to keep track of how many of these points you've collected. There's a bunch of counters. Each of the countries has these DM counters. They have 4 of them, which makes it sound like I could keep track of quite a few points, actually, right? If I had 4 different digits, that puts me into the thousands at least, which seems about right. Because our problems are starting at like 4,500 points of these. Now these come from losses. Each strength point that you lose costs you at least 1. If it surrenders, it costs you 2. Cavalry and artillery cost 2. Engineers cost 2. Surrendering cav and artillery cost more. Headquarters cost 10. Cities. The first time a city is taken by the enemy, it's 15. And each urban hex side is worth 25 when first taken. Okay? That sounds like a lot of points are going to be coming from those. But here's the problem. With the cities, if the war kind of shifts back and forth over them, there's no easy way to record this. So again, you're going to probably like the points themselves. You may have to write these down or maybe create your own little track for the points, but that still doesn't help you with the cities on the board. Marking them on the board with a marker, the board is busy enough. I'd rather not add those markers. So key cities and locations may be worth writing down for this. There aren't that many urban hex sides, to tell you the truth. and there aren't many city centers, although city centers seem to be rarer, and I'm not sure how exactly you define I took an urban hexside. I'm going to say one urban hexside when I take this hex, well, this is 2 urban hexsides here that I've just taken. And now if I take this hex, I've taken 3 more. But that may, oh no, those are suburban. Sorry, there's only 1 here. So there aren't a lot of them urban hexsides either. All right. Should be able to largely remember them, I hope. But it's only the first time it's taken. You retake it, you don't get anything back, and you don't cost the enemy anything. Now, the Germans take double the points for any hexsides in Germany that fall. Cities are urban hexsides. And in addition to the points there, Germany is going to gain another 65 demoralized points every monthly special turn starting in January of 1915. And this represents the blockade and other effects of the disaster on their economy. And actually makes the game able to end in an Allied victory, even though the Germans are consistently, ahead in terms of the actual military situation on the West Front, as historically happened. Things happen as you accumulate these points. So what we get is shaken national morale at certain points, economic collapse, and then surrender. And let's see where the effects are here. They reduce the amount of supply and replacement units on shaken. And that's specified in these supply points and replacement point rules for this. And let's see. Where's the worst one? I think economic collapse just does it even worse. Okay. Surrender sounds like it's going to end the game. I think it may be okay for, say, England to surrender. That may just pull them out of the game. I don't see any indication of that. But, I think that's pretty unlikely. We'll see. The United States is not affected by these. That's what disturbs me. You have the right, as Germany and France, to strip strength points off your fortresses. And I think those come at, what, 3 for 1? Yeah. Every 3 fortress points can give you a replacement point that you can shuffle to the troops. And that actually historically happened. The French have, both the French and the Germans have these deeper in fortresses that were not going to be part of the war. And at some point, actually fairly early, the French started stripping their fortresses of men and throwing them to the front. I don't know how long it took the Germans to do so. We have these supply point reinforcements, which are based on a combination of time and your economic situation with the demoralization effect. They are points that come in by rail, essentially, that you can assign to your headquarters. Sometimes headquarters come on the board with points, though, and you can just assign them directly to the headquarters at that point. Replacement points, well, these come, some of them are pre-programmed and already on here. But after these run out, they come in according to a schedule, basically, every 2 months or something, or every 2 turns you get some. Let's take a look at what the Germans are. Every odd turn in a month you get 1, and every even turn you get 2 for the Germans, for example. And then again, this is time-based. Now, some countries have replacement points for different kind of things. For example, the French have these colonial points. And what's going to happen with those is that they come in at a slower rate, and they come in instead of other replacement points. And the Brits also have, like the Canadians, etc., that have their own special replacement points. Australians. The Belgians get replacement points. They get more if, and a lot more actually, if the Entente happens to hold any Belgian cities. So you have to overrun Belgium with the Germans in this situation. You really want to keep them from getting those because they end up getting like any other country. Let's see, normally they're only going to get them twice per year. But if they survive with city hexes, each city or double for each urban hex side. Again, urban hex sides seem to be worth more than cities. Urban hex sides seem more common than cities. For example, there's 2 urban hex sides here, or maybe 1 and 1 city. City center here. It looks like, yeah, I think an urban hex side is 1 particular hex side shared between 2 hexes. That seems the most reasonable. And there aren't a lot of them total. Liège has just a city center. And these are suburban down here on Lille. Only in France are they urban. So that'll work. And then the US also gets theirs. Okay, so the victory conditions are to force surrender, it looks like. France surrenders in 1914, wins it for Germany right out. Later, well, if you get France or Britain to surrender, you win if you do it by November 1918. If we make it to the 3rd turn of November 1918, which I guess is the end game condition, Germany gets a marginal victory for having done better than historically. The Entente gets it for forcing a German surrender before the historical period. A substantial, if the English and French happen to suffer an economic collapse, and if the German surrender happens before 1918, it's a decisive victory. The game ends if any of those 3 players, any of those 3 countries surrender, or if somebody has a forfeit because of screwing up on the supply. It's an automatic forfeit at the beginning of the game. The Germans lose. Yeah. And let's see. This is all reinforcement scheduling. These black, what are these? These were something special. I remember looking them up and seeing them and saying, what the heck about, because there's a rule about them here. But now I can't see it. Maybe it's just on the German side. Here it is. You have to reduce other units for those. To bring those guys on at strength, you have to take the strength from some other units, which kind of unbalances. It kind of makes them not such great reinforcements. I don't know. I don't think you have to bring. I don't think it takes all the strength. Then there's rules for linking with the Italian and East Front games. Kind of be interested in doing it with just the Italian and West Front. And get the combined reinforcements. And they do not give anything for the grand campaign in this. That's a separate module. Alright. Yeah, I know. This was kind of sketchy. These rules I haven't looked at as carefully. Largely, most of what I need right now is the stuff in the beginning that I'm kind of aware of. But again, it's still special rules for the scenarios. So we'll give this a shot, see what it's like. Hopefully we'll be able to see enough, well, hopefully I'll be able to see enough on my side to decide how interested in the system I am and how much I like it. And by sharing it with you guys, well, those of you who are interested can kind of see, you know, how it all works together and whether or not you're interested. And of course, most of you won't actually watch all that. You'll just watch 6 minutes of the intro and 6 minutes of the review or whatever. But that's okay. You know, this game may not be for everyone, and on the other side, at least it's getting a little bit of extra exposure this way.